Well, tell us about this upcoming conference. Hearing about last year's, I was so jealous that I wasn't able to make it last year. I won't be able to make it this year as well, but last year's sounded absolutely amazing. Tell us what's going to be involved in this year's conference.
Okay, so yeah, so our annual conference, which is our big moment in the calendar every year, is looking really good this year. It's we've got a fantastic lineup of people coming along. We have a focus on, we always have some level of focus on type 2 diabetes, which is going to be this year is going to include Gary Torbs and Dr. Unwin and Ken Berry and others debating how to get us out of this epidemic of type 2 diabetes. We then have a bit of a focus on kids. That's definitely a theme coming through. So the schools program that I talked about, they're going to be explaining exactly what they're doing. And we have Leah Keith supplementing that with her personal story on what she wished she knew when she was a kid as well, a teenager, and hopefully helping people to understand that there are real, consequences to your health that can come from the decisions you make when you're pretty young on what you eat. We have a whole focus on mental health, and that's very much an emerging discussion that's coming through in most conferences now in the low carb space, because there is so much interest and hope and also funding that's going into a lot of studies happening. And we have Dr. Rachel Brown and Dr. Ian Campbell, who's running a study in Edinburgh University on bipolar and the ketogenic diet. So they're talking through all the latest developments there and basically answering the question, can we fix mental health with food? And we then have a final part of that kind of kids theme of how do we save the next generation from the dangers of ultra processed foods, and that is going to be chaired by Jane Buxton. It's going to have Ben Bickman on the panel. I don't know if you know Eddie Abu, who's becoming quite popular on social media.
I love following that guy on social media.
He's coming along, and he's a great supporter of our charity as well. And so that's going to be an interesting conversation for everyone to have, because Eddie obviously has a very different role that he's playing in helping educate the next generation about ultra processed foods to many of us, but he's making such a huge impact. And so those are some of the components. And then the last two main things are that on each day we're going to have a debate, and we're trying to pick topics that we think people are going to be interested in hearing, both sides contrasted, juxtaposed together, where you can more easily understand and compare the different arguments and make your own mind up. And so on the first day, that's going to be answering the question, does red meat shorten lifespan? And that is going to include Dr. Anthony Chaffee, Professor Ben Bickman, and the head nutritionist at the Zoe Institution. I don't know if you know Zoe is part of kind of Tim Spector's work, that they have a lot of work and nutritionist service that they provide to people to move people onto healthy food, but very much focused on more Mediterranean approaches, could we say. So I think that discussion will get onto the blue zones and what is the right way to eat for longevity. And does that include red meat? And is red meat a good or bad factor in that ambition? And so that's the first debate. The second debate is, does cholesterol cause heart disease? And it is pretty much the age-old big one that that people still can't quite put away and conclude, but we still do have pretty much the whole world divided into thinking one way or the other, and there's no consensus on that at the moment. Obviously, there's emerging science that's coming through from people like Dave Feldman, so he's going to be presenting that, discussing that, and we have Dr. Peter Landsberg, who is a pretty well known in the lipidology world as one of the original thought leaders. He has set up databases on lipids and how to manage them across the whole of the Netherlands. He's been one of the original founders of all of that. He has a major kind of statin newsletter that he sends out every week. So he is someone who's very much in the establishment of the current thinking and is someone that we want to really welcome coming along, and actually talking to this type of thing about us, because it's really hard to get people to come and have this open type of discussion. And just on that panel as well, we have Dr. Adrian Sotomoto, who works with Dave Feldman, and also a consultant cardiologist from Liverpool University, Professor Mike Fisher. So it's a kind of a classic lipidologist, a classic cardiologist, and Dave Feldman and Adrian talking about what they think could be going on in certain contexts as to when it isn't necessary to always prescribe statins, and there can be conditions in which the context is important as to whether or not LDL's a concern or not. Story, there is a different side to this, and it's important to consider that we may not know everything that we think we know right now as society, and we've got to keep an open mind, and we've got to keep learning, and being as open-minded about these types of things as possible. And that's really what we're trying to achieve for the general public.
Yeah, well, that all sounds wonderful and very, very relevant. I have conversations daily with my clients about things like cholesterol. It is the one thing that everybody wants to know about. And the thing that I appreciate about what I've heard in the past about these panel discussions and debates that you've had is everything has been very, very respectful. There could have been a great opportunity for something like last year's discussion to be very unrespectful, but everybody, debating whether, animal foods, plant foods kill you, whether, animal foods are necessary for life. The debate that was held last year was a really wonderful example of how we can all talk about these things and get them out in the open without necessarily like throwing rotten tomatoes at each other.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. We just think it's so important. You can't move science forward unless you have these discussions, unless you come at it with a scientific approach, which is that anything is possible. Let's explore, let's be curious. And we just want to instill that in people, and hopefully get people curious, get people thinking that we don't know it all. And we are absolutely resolute that all of this will be done in the kind of, the way that it was done last year, which is that it's, an equal amount of time, airtime for people, and that we will have as much back and forth as we can, because I think that's where the real, nuggets can come out, and we can really find where people are different or similar. And we'll run it very, very much like last year. We might make a few tweaks this year, but the plants debate last year did really well. People were so interested in it. And if, maybe for some people who are very entrenched in this community, it wasn't that much new information, but for many people out there, it's going to be, a source of interest, that are just starting their journey and have just heard all these different things, and they just want someone to sit down and explain both sides, and so they can figure out what's going on. So we're really trying to tap into that mass need, and hopefully we can achieve the same thing this year. We feel very confident we can.
I love that. You said something very interesting, and maybe this is a very obvious question. You said it's sometimes difficult to find people in the establishment that want to come to these conferences and be hosted. If you're listening and not watching, Olivia just gave the biggest eye roll. That was perfect. We also know that there was like a big name that dropped out of the conference, who I was frankly a little surprised was even coming. We don't need to mention his name here, but pretty much anybody in the low carb community will know him for being kind of a doofus. I don't know. But anyway, why do you think it's so difficult to get people who have that established view to come to these type of conferences? If they have the knowledge and the wisdom and everybody knows that they're right about these things, why aren't they more than willing to show up to all of these things?
That is a very, very good question. That is literally the £1 million question as far as I'm concerned. But it's been the hardest part of doing, of getting this, to work, has been to find people who are willing to cross the aisle and have a conversation about what should be their life work, right? Like very much in their kind of their strong suit of knowledge. I think people are just no, I think there's a combination of things, and depending on who it is, I think some people are happy to do it, but there's very few of them. And no matter what we think about them, I'm really grateful that they're happy to do it, because I think that says something. But most people, 99%, and we have spoken to many, and probably most that you would ever have heard of, will be a combination of perhaps fear and not wanting to be exposed in a live environment. Maybe not wanting to, I mean, availability obviously can be a bit of a factor when we're over here in the UK and not everyone is in this area, but we did offer Zoom options to pretty much everyone as well. So it hasn't really been, you know, a hurdle. I just don't think people are at the place where they're ready to have this discussion. And I don't know what you want to read into that as to what that might mean. But it just is not easy to get people to agree to do this. And so we're very, very grateful for the people who have agreed to do it. You know, we're not saying that we know the answer here. We're just saying we should have a discussion, and it could turn out to uncover things that we haven't even thought about. And that is the name of the game. That is us exploring science and trying to move the conversation forward. We don't have a specific agenda. We just want to see progress. And yeah, I don't know how else to answer that, but yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, that's a great way to answer it. I just got back from Dave Feldman's conference, the COSI conference in Las Vegas, and we had a panel discussion. It was an hour and a half with cardiologists who had different opinions on that kind of, statin use and that kind of thing, including Dr. Cromwell and Dr. Nadir Ali. And I just don't think it's very comfortable for people in the establishment to get the kinds of questions that they get, even from the lay public, like people that are just showing up to this conference because they want to learn about this stuff. They're not in the medical establishment, and they ask incredibly wise and diverse questions that I don't think these people are used to answering. So I'm with you. I completely respect and love anybody who's willing to show up to these things. And I also understand why there's not many people, and you have to ask a lot of people to get anybody to agree to it. So again, huge respect to them. Be very curious to watch that kind of thing. But I agree. I think it becomes really uncomfortable to be faced with some of the questions that people have because they've got good questions.
Yeah, I think so. And, and if you're not close to what's going on as well, you may feel like you're going to get caught out, and, you may still believe that what you think is right, but you're just not able to articulate yourself. And some people just don't like debates. Debates can be, a difficult thing for, depending on what kind of person you are, to really thrive in. And sometimes people who don't do well on that may still have the stronger argument, but just not able to articulate it. So there are all those factors as well. But we're just, a lot of the time the people we're asking are people who are pretty forthright and pretty confident in their views, certainly in their own space. So I don't know if that's that much of a factor, but, I'm sure it plays a role.
Yeah, well, that's really well said. And I almost like to think of it as more of like a discussion than an actual debate. I don't think there was much in the way of argument in the past when you guys have held these. And so I hope that will be the case. Again, for people who can attend online, we're going to release this episode just a few days before the conference. So you've got people who can attend in person, which is great. Let's talk about how people can do that. And let's also talk about the people around the world like myself who are not going to be able to be there in person. How can we also participate?
Yeah, absolutely. So in person, we've got tickets on our website. They're selling at phcuk.org/conference. And yeah, you can come along for 1 day, 2 days, and there's a VIP dinner on the Saturday, which would be good fun. But for anyone who's not able to join us in London, and by the way, if you are in the UK and you can come, then it's really worth it, because every single time we have had one of these, the main feedback we get is people just feel on a high, inspired, and looking to kind of conquer the world. And we actually do have a Monday as well tagged onto the Saturday main event of the Saturday and Sunday, where we're calling it Ideas into Action, and we're bringing along as many people who want to join us on the Monday as possible, and saying, all right, well, now what do we do with all this inspiration? Let's capture the magic. Let's think about how you change your own nutrition. Let's think about how we change society. So that's what we're doing on the Monday as well, which we haven't done before, and I don't think many conferences do. So we're kind of feeling our way through that one. So if you can come, then please do, and it really helps support us. If you can't, and you are just interested to listen in from anywhere across the world, then we have live stream tickets which are on sale and will continue to be on sale up until the event. You'll get access to an app where you can watch all of those talks, and it doesn't have to be live, so you actually do retain access to that app for a couple of weeks afterwards, and the talks will still be there. So if you can't, literally watch it live, you have a bit of flexibility around that. So I think that makes it a bit easier for people who need to do things, around their own schedule. But yeah, it doesn't stay on forever, but you'll still have access to it for a little while. Eventually it will be, they'll be on our YouTube, but that'll be much later on. So it's really worth getting the live stream if you can. And it supports a great charity and a great cause. So if you want to give something to charity, this is a chance to get something great back at the same time, and try and change what's going on in the world of nutrition as we know it.